Hi, my name is Bridget. My sister told the world I was a failure, said I didn't belong, said I couldn't handle real life. But last week, I walked into the courtroom where she was being investigated, and the judge stopped everything, looked at me, and said, "Wait, is that the governor?" They weren't expecting me to show up. They definitely weren't expecting me to hold the truth. What happens when the family that erased you suddenly needs your name to survive? What happens when silence doesn't protect them anymore? Do they apologize? Or do they try to erase you all over again? You ever been the ghost at your own family table? Let me tell you what really happened. I didn't expect a warm welcome, but I didn't expect to feel invisible either. The auditorium buzzed with the kind of polished energy that comes from power dressing and name tags with gold embossing. I walked in through the side entrance, deliberately avoiding the carpeted walkway where sponsors and speakers were being announced like royalty. The state bar conference wasn't my kind of stage, not anymore. But it used to be. A long time ago, before everything fractured, I imagined myself standing behind a podium like the one now framed by spotlights. Instead, I found a seat near the back, behind a tall man with too much cologne and a woman typing furiously on a MacBook. My seat creaked as I settled in, the kind of sound that draws attention even when you don't want it. No one turned around. That was the thing. No one ever really saw me unless I was convenient. Then I saw her. Valletta stood off to the side of the stage, flawless in her navy suit and signature red lipstick. She looked like she belonged there. The room leaned toward her, unconsciously, like plants angling for the sun. And our mother, Mary Bell, was already in the front row, clutching a program like it was scripture. She didn't look back. When they introduced Valletta as the future of justice in Texas, the applause was immediate. Loud, proud, and entirely theirs. I didn't clap. I couldn't. As Valletta took the stage, the giant screen behind her flickered through a slideshow. Smiling families, legal outreach programs, community restoration efforts. My throat tightened. One of the photos, blurred slightly, was from the very project I'd spent 3 years building. I remembered the night that picture was taken. I remembered the rain, the woman who'd hugged me after we helped her apply for emergency housing, the smell of mildew in that tiny office we'd turned into a makeshift support center. But my name was gone. In its place, the project was credited to the Jarnell Initiative, with Valletta listed as its founding force. She spoke about resilience and sacrifice. She used my words I'd once scribbled on the back of a napkin during an overnight shift, and repackaged them in pristine legalese. I stared straight ahead, my face blank. My hand moved to my purse, pulled out my phone. I opened the calendar, found the event labeled Valletta's Panel, RSVP'd, and deleted it. No one noticed. After the session, the mingling began. I lingered near the exit, unsure if I should leave or confront. Something. Anything. Our mother caught sight of me then. For a moment, our eyes met. Then she turned to a woman in a burgundy pantsuit and said, "Both my daughters are here today. You've met Valletta, of course." She gestured toward the stage, where Valletta was now surrounded by a semicircle of admirers. "She's remarkable, isn't she?" The woman nodded, then turned to me. "And you? Are you one of the interns helping with the press kit?" I smiled, small and sharp. "No, I'm just here." Maribel didn't correct her. She didn't even blink. I stepped outside before anyone else could speak to me. The late afternoon sun had dipped behind the Capitol dome, casting long shadows across the parking lot. I walked past a banner with Valletta's face on it, smiling, promising, perfect. My heels echoed down the pavement like punctuation marks I didn't choose. As I crossed the side entrance, I caught sight of a poster, an old photo from when the Bar Association first launched its community defense program. I wasn't in the frame, but I remembered being there, just out of shot, holding a clipboard and a case file, back when I thought systems could be fixed from the inside. Funny. That dream lasted longer than most of my relationships. I paused. Not because I wanted to remember, but because forgetting felt like betrayal. Back in fourth grade, I once told my teacher during career day, "I want to change the system." Now, the system had my sister's face, my name deleted, and my work sewn into someone else's suit pocket. But I wasn't angry. Not yet. I was just ready. By the time I pulled into the driveway, the sun had disappeared behind the live oaks lining the curb. The house looked the same: white brick, green shutters, porch light glowing just dim enough to say, "We're home," but not bright enough to say, "You're welcome." I sat there for a moment, watching the curtains shift in the living room window. Someone had seen me pull up. No one came to open the door. I still had a spare key. It was probably a mistake they hadn't changed the locks, but mistakes were a family tradition around here. I let myself in and was met by the scent of overcooked vegetables and lemon polish. The same smell I remembered clinging to my school bag as a kid, and to my pillowcases when I'd cry into them quietly enough not to get asked why. The hallway felt smaller than I remembered. Maybe the house had shrunk, or maybe I'd grown beyond it. Laughter floated in from the dining room, forks tapping china, glasses clinking, my father's unmistakable deep voice cutting through the air like a judge clearing his throat. I stopped just shy of the doorway and took a second before stepping inside. The table was fully set, 6 seats, all occupied. I counted them twice. No empty chair waited for me, no place card, not even a mismatched plate at the corner, like I used to get at Thanksgiving when extra guests showed up. They saw me. Of course they did. My father glanced up mid-sentence, said nothing. My mother smiled like it hurt. Valletta didn't even flinch. She continued telling some story about a district attorney she'd put in check during a panel debate last week. Everyone laughed on cue. I didn't sit. There was nowhere to. I leaned against the entryway wall, folding my arms, listening. I stayed silent long enough for them to pretend my presence wasn't a disruption. That's how we did things. Smooth denial. Ignore it long enough, and maybe it'll go away. When dessert came out, Mom reached under the table and pulled out a small gift box wrapped in striped paper, last Christmas's leftovers. On top was a crooked tag with my name on it. She handed it to Valletta. "You didn't want it," she said without looking at me, "so I gave it to your sister." Valletta accepted the box like she was being handed a business card. No emotion, no acknowledgement. She didn't even unwrap it, just set it beside her plate and returned to her wine. I didn't ask what it was. I already knew. An old scarf I'd once said was too itchy, a scarf I'd left behind on purpose when I left the house the last time. My mother must have found it in the hall closet and decided it was unclaimed property, something to be redistributed. I stepped outside without a word. The air had cooled down since I arrived. A breeze tugged at my sleeves as I leaned against the car and pulled out my phone. A voicemail blinked. "Drexel." I called him back. "You okay?" he asked before I could say anything. "They're still pretending I'm nobody," I replied, staring up at the porch light. A pause. Then his voice lowered. "You ready to remind them who you are?" "Not yet," I said. "I want to see how far they'll go." He didn't need further explanation. Drexel was good at knowing when I needed to talk and when I needed to wait. This was a waiting moment. I stayed outside for a while longer, the sound of dishes clinking through the open window. Someone said something about legacy. Someone else laughed. Probably Dad. He always laughed at anything that implied control. Eventually, I slipped back inside, unnoticed. I wandered down the hall, past the gallery of family photos. They had been rearranged, newer frames, bigger smiles. I paused in front of one from our childhood. Christmas morning, matching pajamas. But something was off. The cropping. I wasn't in it anymore. My edge had been cut out, the right side blurred just enough to seem intentional. I stood there, long enough for Valletta to appear beside me. "Don't linger," she muttered, half a smile curling on her face. "You always did have a thing for drama." I kept my gaze on the photo. Cropping doesn't change what was captured. She walked away. I didn't follow. I didn't sleep much that night. I wasn't restless, just clear. Clarity has a way of keeping you awake without stirring. I made tea around 2, watched the steam drift off the rim like a breath I wasn't ready to exhale, and let the silence settle around me like a coat I no longer needed to take off in their presence. By morning, my calendar was empty except for a single generic email invite. Subject line: Charity Gala, Austin City Foundation. No greeting, no sender name, just a time, a location, and a note. See you there. I didn't RSVP. I didn't need to. When I walked into the ballroom that evening, I did it the way they always assumed I wouldn't. Quietly, without a camera crew, without a name tag, and without fanfare. The chandeliers were doing too much, dangling like overcompensation. Tables were wrapped in gold linen, the kind of showy softness that people mistake for elegance. Drexel met me by the bar. He looked sharp, crisp gray suit, and that same dry expression he wore when he knew something was about to unravel. "You're really doing this?" he asked, sipping from a glass of water like it was vodka. I nodded. "I want to see how low they think I still am." He didn't push back. It didn't take long. Valletta had already worked the room into her orbit. She stood under one of those spotlights, like they had custom-rigged it, just to land perfectly on her hair. Flawless, poised. She laughed with donors like she'd known them since birth. I stood by the far end of the room, sipping Pinot Noir I didn't even like, and watched it unfold. Then came the moment. Valletta caught sight of me. Her smile didn't falter. She lifted her glass, waved slightly to a man in a tux, and said, loud enough for the 3 reporters nearby to hear, "That's Bridget. She's helping out on the press team tonight, a real asset in logistics." A beat. Then the man turned, looked me up and down, and said, "Nice to see young blood still doing groundwork." Groundwork. The word landed like a punch in slow motion. Drexel stiffened. I didn't. I just kept sipping. Cameras flashed. Valletta had already moved on. I didn't respond. Didn't correct anyone. Didn't even blink. I simply walked toward the edge of the room where a server passed by with a tray of wine. I grabbed a second glass and moved toward the back. If they wanted to think I was the intern, let them. But interns don't usually donate 6 figures under an alias. I waited until the second round of speeches died down, then found the event director, a woman in her 50s with tired eyes and a clipboard like it was her shield. I approached her without introduction. "Excuse me," I said, calm and polite. She looked up, startled. I handed her a printed receipt. "This is a record of the Foundation's largest anonymous contribution this quarter. It came from a donor listed as R. Varnes Holdings. That's me." She blinked, looked down, scanned the document. Her mouth parted, then closed. "I didn't come to be thanked," I said, "but if anyone asks what interns do here, tell them we bankroll the lights." Then I walked away. No microphone, no spotlight, just a mirror, and I'd handed it to her gently. Drexel caught up with me by the hallway near the staff entrance. "That was brutal," he whispered. "It wasn't," I said. "It was just honest. I wasn't there to humiliate her. I was there to calibrate the truth. And if it cut her in the process, well, that wasn't my hand on the blade." Later, as the event thinned out and waitstaff began clearing plates, I felt a tap on my shoulder. Valletta. She looked calm. Too calm. "What was that?" she asked, each word pulled like thread between her teeth. "You mean the donation?" I asked, tilting my head slightly. She crossed her arms. "You trying to embarrass me?" I shook my head slowly. "You should stop assuming I'm still surviving." Her eyes narrowed. "What does that mean?" "It means I'm observing, and you're providing content." She didn't respond. She didn't have to. That was the thing about people who live in curated stories. They never expect someone else to hold the original draft. She left without saying goodbye. I stayed a little longer, not to celebrate, not to bask, just to make sure the lights were still on. By Monday morning, the buzz from the gala had already faded into curated photos and quotes stripped of truth. The kind of posts people share not because they care, but because it makes them look like they do. I arrived at the office early. The parking lot was still half empty, just the way I liked it. Drexel wasn't in yet. I unlocked the door, flipped the lights, and dropped my bag on the corner of my desk. I had intended to review some grant proposals, maybe follow up on a housing initiative stuck in committee. But there it was, a thick, sealed manila envelope lying on my chair, like a challenge waiting to be opened. No sender, no return address, just my name printed on a white label in block letters. Bridget Varnes. I sat down slowly and peeled it open. Inside were 2 copies of a project charter, identical in structure, not in substance. The first was mine. I recognized it immediately. Dated 7 years back, the header still bore the name of the pilot I'd built. Community Legal Pathways, my proudest blueprint, handwritten notes in the margins still faintly visible after scanning. My name was there, typed clearly beneath the title. Founder, Bridget K. Varnes. The second document, same project title, same content, except the credit had been wiped and replaced. Founder, Valletta Jarnell. This version was notarized. 2 months after the original, signed off with a stamp from a notary public in Travis County. All official, all neat. Except it wasn't. I didn't flinch. I didn't rage or call anyone. I just read it twice, then set both pages side by side on the desk and stared at them like they were opposite ends of the same lie. It wasn't just theft. It was calculated repackaging, reframing history to make it more palatable under a more reputable name. The door clicked open. Drexel stepped in, holding a coffee and a bagel in one hand, phone balanced in the other. "You get here before the alarm again?" he asked, half teasing. I didn't respond right away, just slid the papers across the desk toward him. He scanned the first, then the second. His eyebrows lifted. "Well," he said, setting down his coffee, "this is sloppy. Smart, but sloppy." "You see the notary date?" I asked. "Yep. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was an overwrite." He tapped the corner of the notarized page. "Somebody wanted this buried, and somebody else wanted it to be found." I folded my arms. "Not through the courts." "No. Through you," he said. "They want you to decide what it's worth." I nodded. I didn't copy the pages, didn't digitize them. I slipped them into the drawer beside my desk and closed it slowly. Drexel didn't push. He knew the silence was strategy, not surrender. That evening, I was invited to a small policy roundtable hosted by a local reform group. I went not because I felt like networking, but because I needed to be in a room where my name hadn't been photoshopped out of the story. Valletta wasn't there. Of course she wasn't. She never came to events unless there were press badges and cocktail hours. But Maribel was. She sat at the end of the room, hands folded neatly in her lap, wearing that same cream sweater she always wore when she wanted to look like the mother of the year. We made eye contact across the room, the kind that only lasts when neither party wants to start a war, but neither wants to wave the white flag either. After the panel ended and people began drifting out, I approached her quietly. She stood before I reached her. "Bridget," she said, smiling like nothing had happened. Like her last act hadn't been handing my name to someone else, like an old coat no one wanted to claim. I leaned in and asked gently, "What do you think I gave up to get out?" She blinked, caught off guard. Her face stiffened, just for a moment. Then she answered, just as softly, "Your name." I nodded. "And she's still using it." She didn't respond. She just touched her necklace, a nervous tic she always had when she wanted to look calm, but didn't feel it. I walked away without another word. On my way home, I took the long route, detouring through a neighborhood where I'd once worked on a mural project with a group of immigrant youth. I hadn't been back in years. I didn't even know if the mural still stood. But there it was, weather-worn but intact, stretching across the length of a concrete retaining wall like a statement no one had asked permission to make. Faces, words, symbols of resistance. And in the bottom right corner, just above the faded paint splatter, were the initials, BK. I pulled over, turned off the engine, rolled down the window. The wind carried faint laughter from a nearby park. Someone was playing music out of an old speaker. I sat there and looked at that mural for a long time. The first time in years my name had been attached to something that hadn't been altered, rebranded, or reclaimed by someone else. No applause, no plaque, just truth, in paint, holding up under time. And it was enough. The mural faded in my rearview mirror, but the feeling didn't. It clung to me the whole way home, something raw and grounding. I didn't need to be named in bronze. That wall, chipped and unfiltered, told the truth without needing permission. By the time I pulled into my driveway, the sun had already dipped low, dragging a quiet over the city like a blanket settling in. I slept better than I had in weeks. 3 days later, Drexel stood in my office doorway, holding a folded printout. "It's official," he said. "Preliminary hearing, Valletta, public docket, Travis County Courthouse, Wednesday, 8:30 a.m. No press listed yet." I didn't say anything, just nodded, walked over to the calendar on my wall, and circled the date. I didn't tell him I was going. I didn't need to. He already knew. Wednesday came fast. I left before sunrise. No assistant, no security detail. I took the south entrance. No banners, no flashbulbs, no one waiting. Just me and the sound of my shoes tapping across the stone floor. The cold inside the courthouse was the kind that settled into your wrists and held on, like memory. Courtroom 3B was quiet when I arrived. It was still early. A bailiff with a clipboard looked up as I entered, but didn't stop me. I took a seat in the last row. No one recognized me yet. I didn't dress to be seen. I wore all black, no makeup, my hair pulled back simply. The kind of look that says, "I'm here to listen." Nothing more. People trickled in slowly, lawyers in stiff suits, clerks carrying files too thick for a single hearing. Then Valletta entered, flanked by her defense team like armor. Her suit was perfect, her posture rehearsed. She glanced once toward the back, expression unreadable. If she saw me, she didn't show it. Colton and Maribel arrived next. My father, stiff as ever, jaw clenched like he was bracing for war. My mother, well, she wore that same look she always did when things got complicated. Tight lips, tired eyes, pearls around her neck, like they could hold her together. They didn't notice me either. Judge Audrey Jameson entered promptly at 8:30. I remembered her from a conference years ago, sharp, no patience for posturing. She took her seat, scanned the courtroom with that sweeping glance judges have when they want the room to settle. And then she paused. It wasn't dramatic, just a stillness, like a record skipping half a beat. Her gaze fixed on me. I didn't move. She leaned forward slightly, squinted, then spoke into the mic. Flat, direct. "Wait, is that Bridget Varnes, the governor?" Every head turned. Like a wave, like dominoes, one after another. The courtroom shifted. Colton's face twitched, anger or confusion, maybe both. Maribel's hand flew to her chest. A soft gasp escaped her lips, audible even from the back. Valletta spun around in her chair, eyes locking with mine for the first time in over a year. I didn't smile. I didn't nod. I didn't flinch. I just looked back. Even. I could feel the room recalibrating around me, people whispering, adjusting their assumptions. The bailiff near the door checked his roster, confused. Someone raised a phone. A lawyer murmured something to his paralegal. Reporters who'd just begun arriving scrambled for their notepads. But I didn't come to be interviewed. I came to witness. The hearing began like any other. Motions filed, calendar dates set. Valletta's attorney made a case for procedural delay. The prosecutor objected. The usual legal dance. I didn't need to listen. I already knew the rhythms. I had written some of them. The judge glanced at me once more during a recess, but didn't say anything else. She didn't need to. Her question had done what it needed to do. When court adjourned for a short break, I stood up quietly, before the room could try to reclaim its control. I walked down the same aisle I'd come in through, past people who suddenly couldn't make eye contact, out the same door, into the morning air. Drexel was waiting by the car, leaned against the hood like he'd been there the whole time. He didn't ask how it went, just looked at me and said, "That was surgical." I shrugged. They needed a witness. I volunteered. He smiled at that, barely. We didn't say anything else. We didn't need to. I hadn't gone there to make a scene. I hadn't gone there to humiliate anyone. I went to remind the room, and the woman sitting in the center of it, that erasure isn't permanent. You can scrub a name from a file, rewrite a credit line, crop a photo, but you can't erase presence. You can't silence history when it walks in on 2 feet and sits quietly in the back row. It wasn't revenge, it was just a mirror. After the courthouse, I went home through the back roads, windows down, no music. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel much at all. I just kept replaying the moment Judge Jameson called my name, like she was saying it for the first time in a room full of people who had tried to forget I existed. Once inside, I tossed my bag on the bench by the door and headed to my home office. The news was already on, one of those midday programs that fill time between stock updates and weather alerts. Governor Varnes makes surprise appearance at courthouse, the anchor said, linked to her sister's investigation, but no official statement has been released. Good. I didn't need to release anything. The room had spoken for me. The window above my desk was cracked open, letting in the scent of wet oak and the distant hum of lawnmowers from a neighbor's yard. I reached for my tablet, started sifting through a few briefings for next week's education committee hearing, but then my phone buzzed once, sharp, short, unmistakable. I glanced at the screen. Colton Varnes. Text only. 3 lines. You embarrassed our name. We need to talk. Tonight. No punctuation. Just wait. I stared at it for a full 3 seconds, then hit the lock button and placed the phone screen down. Not even a question. Not even, why were you there? Just judgment, as usual. That man could squeeze an entire trial into 1 sentence and never leave room for appeal. Drexel walked in without knocking, a habit I'd stopped correcting long ago. He carried 2 coffees, one already half empty. Media's spinning, he said. A few think you're planning to run for Senate. One guy suggested it was a family intervention. I raised an eyebrow. An intervention for what? Not being erased quietly? He shrugged. Public loves mystery, keeps them entertained. I sat down in the leather chair across from him. You think I should respond? He hesitated. Would it help? I shook my head. I'll let them keep guessing. He leaned against the filing cabinet. Your dad's probably not guessing. I smiled without warmth. My father thinks my title belongs to him. I'm not sure he even knows what I actually do. That bad, huh? He still introduces me to people as our youngest, like I'm a Labrador, not a policymaker. Drexel gave a low laugh. He's watching you play chess and still thinks it's checkers. Exactly. We let the silence settle for a moment. I could hear birds outside, too loud for this time of day. I reached into the bottom drawer of my desk and pulled out an old leather-bound notebook. The corners were worn, the spine cracked. I opened it slowly. Inside, on the first page, was a sentence I had written years ago. After the video, after being pushed out of the house with nothing but a duffel bag and my ID. I was the one they erased to preserve the illusion. I whispered it out loud. Not for drama, for practice. I flipped to the next page. You don't owe them the version of yourself that makes them comfortable. That one still hit. Maybe harder now. I closed the notebook and sat with it in my lap. The screen on my phone lit up again. Another message. A follow-up from my father. Come to the house. No press. Just us. There it was. The pull of blood. The assumption of ownership. I picked up the phone and opened a draft reply. I didn't embarrass your name. I just stopped hiding mine. I hovered over send. My thumb rested on it, steady. Then I deleted the message. I typed something else. Let's not pretend this is about family. It never was. Another pause. Another deletion. I set the phone down again. From the other side of the room, Drexel spoke quietly. You gonna respond? No, I said. Let them stew. Silence is louder when they know what you could have said. He nodded. That's cold. No, I replied. That's called growing up. We didn't say anything else. There wasn't anything else to say. I stood and walked to the window, watched as a young woman jogged by, earbuds in, ponytail bouncing like freedom. I wondered what she'd think if she knew someone out there still believed their daughter was a liability. Still thought the worst thing she could do was show up and be seen. Funny how people claim they want strength, until it shows up in their own bloodline. Let them sit in that. Let them hear the echo of what I didn't say. If silence is power, then my father just heard me scream. 2 days passed before Drexel said anything. He waited, like he always did, until the room was quiet, until my phone was face down, and until the air had settled between us like a contract. He stood in my office doorway that morning, with an envelope tucked under his arm, and a look I hadn't seen since the week I left home for good. I think you should sit for this, he said. I didn't. He handed me the folder anyway. Inside were 2 pages, no logo, no header, just text, clean and clinical. You're on a private surveillance list, he said, commissioned through a third-party firm that usually handles internal vetting for political candidates. I flipped the page. It's your father, he added. Colton contracted the sweep personally. Background review, old emails, phone logs, campaign finance audits, even flagged a file from when you rented a U-Haul in Denver 5 years ago. I didn't speak. I scanned the lines like they were weather reports for a storm that had already passed. Quietly, I folded the pages in half and slid them back into the envelope. They're scared, I finally said. Drexel nodded. And fear gets sloppy. We didn't talk about it after that. Later that afternoon, Drexel texted from our encrypted archive system. He'd found something else, deeper, older, something the firm didn't mean to surface. It was an audio file tucked inside a cluster of corrupted voicemail data recovered from a decommissioned account Colton had once used. I walked down the hall to Drexel's side office. He was already at his desk, screen lit, earbuds in. He pulled one out and offered it to me. It's from 11 years ago, he said. Valletta to your father. He didn't say more. I put the bud in and hit play. Her voice was unmistakable, calm, almost sterile. She's the one in the video, Valletta said. If this gets out, you need to cut her loose, permanently. There was no hesitation in her voice, no remorse, no context, just a directive. I listened once, then again. Not because I didn't believe it, but because my brain needed time to catch up with the part of me that already knew. The betrayal hadn't been a reaction, it had been a decision. Calculated, logged, spoken out loud into a phone line, and filed away like an action item on a to-do list. I didn't cry, but the air changed. Back in my office, I forwarded the file to my legal team with a simple subject line. Archive. Internal use only. Then I closed my laptop and stared at the window. Outside, the city moved like it always did. Pedestrians crossing too slowly, a siren wailing somewhere too far to help. I didn't want to destroy her, but I wasn't hiding anymore either. That night, I made one phone call to the team coordinating an upcoming town hall forum for local constituents. We'd planned to talk about zoning laws and transit budgets. I changed the topic. Family ethics in public leadership, I said. I want that title on the event page. Should we link this to your sister's hearing? No, I answered. This isn't about her. But people will assume. They'll assume what they need to, I cut in. I'm just giving them better things to assume. By the next morning, the forum was posted. RSVPs started flooding in. Local reporters requested press access. Political blogs speculated I was laying groundwork for a national run. They were wrong. This wasn't a campaign, it was a correction. The night before the town hall, I drove to my childhood home, not to confront, not to enter, just to leave something. I placed an envelope under the front doormat. Inside, one sheet of paper. On it, a single line. You didn't erase me, you only postponed the truth. I didn't knock. I didn't ring the bell. I just walked back to my car and drove away, windows down, no music. The next evening, the room was packed. More people than I expected, some old friends, some former staffers, a few new interns who hadn't known my name until last week. I stood at the podium as calmly as if I were reading a grocery list. I didn't mention Valletta. I didn't reference the file. I didn't point fingers. But I told the room what happens when families turn silence into strategy, when loyalty becomes currency, when image matters more than accountability. I spoke plainly. I didn't raise my voice. And near the end, just before the closing remarks, I saw her. Valletta, in the back row. No entourage, no blazer. Just her, in civilian clothes, arms folded across her chest. She didn't stand. She didn't speak. She didn't leave. And I didn't look away. 48 hours after the town hall, I received an email from my mother. No subject line, no message body, just a forwarded calendar invite. Dinner, just family. 7 Hal p.m. Sunday. I didn't accept it, didn't decline either. I simply showed up. The house hadn't changed. Same hedges, same wind chimes, same porch light that flickered once every few seconds like a nervous habit. I parked across the street and sat for a moment, watching the shadows shift behind the curtains. Inside, the table was already set. 7 chairs this time. One of them had a folded napkin placed carefully in front of it. Mine, apparently. The room smelled like baked chicken and rosemary, an attempt at comfort dressed up as familiarity. Colton sat at the head of the table, posture like steel. Valletta was already seated, her face unreadable, hands folded tight in her lap. She didn't look up when I entered. Maribel stood near the kitchen doorway, smoothing down a wrinkle in the table runner that no one but her would ever notice. "It's time we talk about how to move forward," she said, her voice higher than usual. I nodded and took the empty seat. Dinner was quiet. Too quiet. No one asked about work. No one brought up the weather. Colton cleared his throat once, then twice, like he was revving up to say something important. Then he slid a manila folder across the table. Valletta looked down. "This is a character reference," he said. "For the court. From you." I didn't touch the folder. "Valletta made mistakes," he went on, "but family fixes family. A letter from you could keep this out of the press, keep her license intact. You're the governor now. That signature means something." I stared at him for a long time. Then at Maribel. Then at Valletta. I reached for my water glass, took a sip, set it down. "Do you remember what she told you?" I asked, eyes on Colton. 11 years ago, about me, the video." Silence. "Because I do," I continued. Word for word. Maribel looked away. Valletta said nothing. The silence wasn't defensive. It was confirmation. I pushed the folder back toward the center of the table. "You didn't invite me here to talk," I said. "You invited me here to leverage me." Colton exhaled sharply. "Bridget, this doesn't have to be a war." I stood slowly, smoothed the crease in my skirt, placed my napkin beside the untouched plate. "If I weren't the governor," I asked, looking each of them in the eye, "would I even be invited tonight?" No one answered. Maribel reached for my hand, tentative, tears already gathering. I stepped back. "You didn't lose me," I told her gently. "You just built a version of this family that had no space for me." Valletta finally looked up then. Her eyes were tired, maybe afraid. I didn't wait to hear what she had to say. I walked out. That same night, I stood behind a podium beneath the rotunda of the Capitol, lights above me bright and sterile. The press was there, cameras blinking red, reporters shifting in their seats. I didn't read from notes. "I'm introducing the Kinship Disclosure Act," I said, It requires all public officials to disclose familial ties in any ongoing legal investigation or court matter involving abuse of power or ethical misconduct. I paused. This bill isn't about family, it's about transparency. Legacy without truth is just branding, and branding is not governance. A murmur ran through the room. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't say Valletta's name, but everyone heard it anyway. I left the podium without fielding questions. Drexel met me near the side exit. He said nothing, just held the door open. We walked in, stepped down the marble hallway. Behind me, flashbulbs burst. Ahead of me, the corridor was quiet. It wasn't vindication. It wasn't rage. It was policy. 2 weeks after the bill passed, I found myself in Denver. The official reason was a community leadership summit, but part of me knew it was more than that. The air here had always been different. Thinner, sharper, the kind that makes you remember how to breathe on your own. I walked through the lobby of the South District Community Center like I had a dozen times before. No one asked who I was. No one snapped photos. That was the gift of Denver. Anonymity without isolation. In the main hallway, a new exhibit had gone up. Youth art, according to the flyer taped to the glass. Visions from the margins. I stepped inside, mostly out of habit. But the second painting caught me. It was a canvas, medium-sized, framed but unpretentious. Bold colors, abstract shapes bleeding into one another. Grit, bloom, silence, defiance. I didn't need to read the title. I knew the piece. I had painted it during one of the hardest years of my life and left it behind when I moved, assuming it would collect dust or be tossed out. But it had survived. The placard underneath read, Title, Outgrown Artist. Unknown, donated anonymously. And underneath that, in someone's handwriting, added later in black ink, she was never unknown to us. I stood there longer than I should have, pretending I was studying the brushwork. But really, I was letting the moment settle. Not because it was grand, because it was quiet. Because it had my name without needing to spell it. Back in Austin, a week later, I received a message from our finance officer, a monthly audit packet. I flipped through the documents absent-mindedly until one page stopped me. A closed bank account, dormant since my 20s, showed an old attempted deposit, $100. Transfer declined. Date, 11 years ago. The week I left home. Sender, Maribel Varnes. I stared at the screen for a long time. It wasn't the money, it was the pause it created inside me. Not a gift, not an apology, just a single act that never landed. In my journal that night, I wrote, Some love you just enough to send it, but not enough to let it arrive. I didn't need to call her. I didn't need her to explain. But I understood something in that moment that I hadn't allowed myself to admit before. Sometimes silence isn't abandonment. Sometimes it's all someone knows how to offer. The next morning, I drove back to the house where everything had started. I didn't call ahead. I didn't plan to stay. I parked 2 blocks down and walked the rest of the way. The air warm enough to skip a coat, but cool enough to sting a little. The front yard looked the same shutters, same creak in the gate. I stood there for a moment, then pulled the sealed envelope from my bag. Inside was a signed copy of the Kinship Disclosure Act and a handwritten note. I didn't write this to punish you. I wrote it so no one else has to be erased like I was. I slid it through the front door mail slot. I didn't ring the bell. I didn't wait to see if anyone was home. I turned and walked back the way I came. That evening, I passed by the Capitol building. Reporters were gathered on the lawn, still trying to tie my name to something louder, something flashier. A man from one of the news blogs called out after me. Governor Varnes, off the record, are you satisfied with how this ended? I didn't stop. Drexel caught up with me a few steps later, hands in his pockets. You okay? He asked. I looked ahead. Nothing really ends, I said, but now it can begin without pretending. We crossed the plaza, the sounds of the city swallowing our footsteps. Somewhere in the distance, church bells rang the hour. I didn't need a headline. I didn't need closure. I needed the truth to have room to breathe. They tried to end my story. I just decided I'd write the sequel myself.